So, just wrap up in 1 or 2 minutes on this issue. Just say that, just like to draw people's attention to the campaign on the DESH schools in urban areas, and that was very successful recently. And they forced Minister Quinn's hand on the issue. Now, the fact that he had 17 DESH schools in his own constituency, which is also the constituency of the Sinn Féin deputy Sean Crowe, would have had some effect on that. Sinn Féin party would have made this a very central issue in Leinster House, and it was actually Sinn Féin that moved a motion on this, which drew a very clear demarcation line in Leinster House of those who were in favour of it and those who were against it. And we saw the way people voted, the way local TDs voted on that issue, and basically who were in favour and who were against. And we can see the same on the motions around small schools. It's clear like which Wexford politicians were very much in favour of the budget cuts and who was against. So people can just check those facts themselves. So the next time I would say to people, like, when politicians speak with a forked tongue, when they say one thing in Enniscorthy or Gorey or Wexford, how much they support a local school or how much they support people in the fight against septic tank charges, just watch the way they vote when they go to Leinster House, which is a totally different way. So there's one line that they have for Dublin, there's one line they have for here. So I think people need to remind them of that kind of a fork-tongued way to address the issue. And just what came up at a meeting in Bray last week, in Bree last week, was that a lot of the local politicians who are making these decisions didn't turn up to the meeting. Like Brendan Howell didn't have too far to travel, he didn't come, Paul Keogh didn't come, John Brown didn't come. So people are very much of the view that if they won't come to the meeting, the crowds need to actually go to them. Now, whether that means holding rallies in Enniscorthy or Gorey or New Ross or Wexford, I think that's probably what needs to be done. It will bring the issue home to them. And we saw recently with Paul Keogh, like, he was anything but pleased the fact that to see hundreds turning up outside his office. So I think that is the only way, like, to actually make these people wake up. And I'll just leave it at that for now, because I'm sure John and the other speakers have plenty more to say, and after that we'll throw it open to the floor as basically your meeting, whatever issues you'd like to address. So I'll hand you over now to Councillor John Brady.
Thanks, Fintan. I don't think I need the mic. Can people hear me down the back there? Yep, oh, okay. We'll work away without the mic. First of all, I want to thank Fintan and the Sinn Féin organisation here in Wexford for organising this meeting. It's one in a series of meetings which has taken place right throughout the state, you know, in parishes and towns and villages all over the place. And secondly, I want to thank each and every one of you for turning out here this evening. As Fintan said, there's been thousands of people have come out in parishes right across the state also, you know, to partake, to listen, and to get involved in campaigns and activities in their own localities. Because I think people at this stage have given the government a year to see as to whether they could offer something different. We all know the promises that were made in the run-up to the general election last year. We were promised something completely different. Now, thankfully, I didn't vote for them. I was a candidate for Sinn Féin in County Wicklow and narrowly missed out on taking a seat there. And I'm sure there's hopefully not too many people here did fall for the lies and were hoodwinked by Fine Gael and Labour into believing that they would offer something different. But you know, people in general have given them a year to see what they had to offer us, and it's blatantly obvious now that their intent on following the failed policies that Fianna Fáil and the Greens had laid down. You know, and people are bitterly disappointed, particularly with the Labour Party, who claim to be a left alternative to the mainstream political parties, and we see that, you know, any ideology that they had stood for previously has firmly been cast aside. And you know, we see that only last week with the selling off of state assets in Quilcha, etc. So you know, it's safe to say people were sold a pub. the honeymoon is now over. We know at this point they've taken over 8.6 billion out of the economy here in Ireland. Their austerity policies are impacting not just in rural Ireland but in all parts of Ireland. And Fintan gave a very good synopsis there as to where those impacts are being hit, and what people, what communities are having to pick up the pieces of this austerity as it's called. Now there's I suppose there's so many different things happening around Ireland at this point in time, and particularly in rural parts of Ireland. And just driving down on the news, I was listening to the attack on the Garda, that 31 predominantly rural Garda stations are in the process of closing, and that may go up to over 200 over the next short period of time. And again, most of those are in rural parts of Ireland where crime, as we know, during austerity and recession, crime soars, particularly burglaries and that. And it's totally counterproductive to be closing down Garda stations and cutting Garda numbers at a time like that. The other major issue affecting rural Ireland is the whole debate and this whole move towards imposing charges on septic tanks, and what kind of inspections and what kind of standards are going to be imposed on people. And certainly it's not a new thing. This, the whole issue of registration for septic tanks goes right back to 1975. So it's not something that has only been sprung on the new government of Fine Gael and Labour. It goes right back to 1975 when there was a European directive given. There's 35 years between that and now, and it's beyond me, and certainly Sinn Féin have put a whole load of questions as to why this hasn't been dealt with before now. And indeed, I attended a public meeting in Aughrim in County Wicklow there just before Christmas, when we had Fianna Fáil's Eamon O'Queeve, who, he doesn't know whether he's Fianna Fáil or what he is now at this point in time. He's trying to be all things to all people. But I put the point to him as it was his party that was in government at that time when they had an opportunity to deal with this issue once and for all back in 75. They failed to do so. He said they took a high court or a European court challenge against this directive, which was dealt with 2009, 2010. Again, there was a failure to deal with it. And now, at this point, when our backs are against the wall, Europe is saying if we don't implement these regulations, that we will be fined heavily on a daily basis until there is a registration and proper guidelines in place. Now, I suppose Sinn Féin, to put out there straight away, Sinn Féin is totally supportive of clean water. Who isn't? You'd want to be a lunatic to oppose clean water. We're all in favour of proper operational septic tanks as well. But the major concern we have, and this was covered during the debates that went on in Leinster House around this issue, where Sinn Féin tabled many alternatives, many proposals and amendments to the regulations and legislation that was going through the Dáil. And unfortunately, the vast majority, 127 amendments, thanks Johnny, 127 amendments Sinn Féin put forward. And rather than sitting down and adjudicating and taking on board logical alternatives, what Fine Gael and Labour decided to do was guillotine the debate on it and cut short the debate within Leinster House. But Sinn Féin and others have been heavily involved within the communities. I mean, this is an issue that's driven by people in rural Ireland because they see it as very much an attack on them, and rightfully so, because at the same time they're trying to impose the septic tank charges. We have a look at the other stealth taxes that are being introduced, i.e. the household charge. Again, a blunt instrument, very much the thin end of the wedge. Once it's introduced at €100, it'll be pushed up year in, year out then until, you know, they pull in the, you know, €1,000 odd they're hoping to get on an annual basis. So the same applies with the septic tank issue. That people are frightened, people are fearful, and rightfully so. And there's been a massive campaign, and indeed Sinn Féin and Wicklow have organised meetings, and, you know, all parts of the county. And only there recently we held a meeting in Baltinglass, and there was a massive turnout there for that meeting as well. Now, Phil Hogan, the Minister for the Environment, has pulled back a bit. Initially he was talking about a massive registration fee, he was talking about all sorts of things, and, you know, the pressure that's being brought to bear on him, not just by Sinn Féin, but other, you know, communities and other organisations, has had some impact. He's pulled back a bit on the registration fee. He's now saying it's going to be a £5 for the first 3 months, and after that it's going to be €50. But the one thing he's failed to do now, last week he did issue some guidelines around the, you know, as the house septic tanks are going to be looked upon, the standards in which they're going to be assessed. And, you know, it's pretty appalling. I have a copy of it here. And it's basically, he's put this document out for public consultation, and people need to go online onto the Department for the Environment website if you have access to the internet. Again, people in rural Ireland are victimised. They don't have access to broadband as such, as, you know, opposed to people in urban Ireland. But if people have, if people want copies of this, if they come up to the top of the table here, we can organise to get copies of it. But people have up until the 30th of March to have a look at this and make submissions to Phil Hogan about the standards in which septic tanks are going to be assessed on. And it's really a whole lot about nothing. Basically, there's four major points he touches on. The first is general responsibilities for the house owner and the septic tank owner. The second issue is discharges from the treatment system. The third thing is sludge removal. And the final point he touches on is the general operational requirements. There's nothing there whatsoever to do with how these are going to be inspected, the quality of water in which you know, they're going to be assessed upon. And most critical of all, there's no mention whatsoever of any grants being made available to people in rural Ireland that may have to have their septic tanks upgraded. And Fintan's right, you know, we've spoken to the IFA, we've spoken to many other organisations, and they estimate that, you know, upgrading a septic tank, depending on the level of works required, could in some cases be 5,000 up to possibly 17,000, depending on you know, the age of the septic tank, etc. Because, you know, the major concern Sinn Féin has here, and it's you know, totally left out of the guidelines that the government have issued, is, you know, what EPA standards, Environmental Protection Agency standards, our septic tanks and discharge is going to be assessed on. And we've argued consistently right from the outset that you know, it's totally unfair that someone who got planning permission maybe in the 70s, installed their septic tank in accordance with the guidelines, with the regulations at that time,